Hello and welcome to Brian Moore's Full Contact with the Telegraph. After a week off, the Six Nations resumes this weekend. The standout clash comes from Twickenham, where England take on unbeaten France. Been a tournament to forget so far for the defending champions, who've lost 2 out of their opening 3 games. Head coach Eddie Jones has faced criticism for his team selections, and with a number of players performing well in the Gallagher Premiership, is it time for him to shake things up a bit? We'll discuss that, as well as England's chances throughout the show today. As for France, they'll be playing their first Six Nations game since mid-February, after their last game against Scotland was postponed. A number of French players broke COVID protocols, but amazingly, after an investigation, which was a blue wash, they were found to have done nothing wrong by leaving their bubble, and they've been granted permission to resume the tournament. We'll be speaking to the former French international Thomas Castaignède to get his reaction to this story and to look ahead to the clash, which we'll see France edge closer to a Grand Slam if they win. Elsewhere, Wales' unlikely march also towards a Grand Slam will surely continue when they take on Italy in Rome, and the 2 potential Lions coaches, Gregor Townsend and Andy Farrell, go head-to-head in Edinburgh as Scotland hosts Ireland. As ever, we'll be answering your questions, including the latest on the Lions tour. But alongside me, and it's appropriate because it's International Women's Day today, is the former England back row, Maggie Alphonsi. Hello, Maggie.
Hello, Brian. Thank you for having me on. It's great to be here on a special day.
Yes, absolutely. Well, listen, Women's Day is every day in my household because there are 5 women and me. So that's I never get a vote anyway. Look, it's been a poor Six Nations so far for England. A lot of our guests have shared their thoughts on what's been going wrong so far. Can I ask you to do that as well?
Sure. I mean, I think there's been a lot of points made about England's recent performances. I mean, for me, I think the first one is obviously, the spine of the England team, those key Saracens players who are in decision-making positions haven't necessarily put in their best performances. Billy Vunipola was one who was very open about, not necessarily performing at his best. Had a better performance, though, definitely not last weekend, the weekend before that. So he's definitely stepped that up. But I think, some of the key players hadn't necessarily stood up.
What about the captain? Because Lawrence Delalio was speaking to the Telegraph, and he said that Itoje or George should replace Farrell.
See, look, Brian, you know what it's like to lead a team, and I think when it comes to Owen Farrell, I think it's really hard to be I imagine it's really hard to be a captain at fly half. Look, I'm not fly half. I don't know what it would be like, but the pressure on your shoulders, and I think Farrell has had some ups and downs. We've seen him over the last few seasons, take on that captain mantle, and at times the way he communicates with the referee sometimes isn't necessarily appropriate. I think that some of the best captains, the best captain I've ever witnessed has definitely been Richie McCaw.
Oh, yeah.
He rarely got red cards or yellow cards. I don't think he ever got a red card at all in his career, but he obviously got a couple of yellow cards. And it's because of the way he communicated, that relationship that he built up with the referees. Sam Warburton was another one when he was captain, was very good at that. So I think people would say, Owen Farrell probably could do that a lot better.
I'll tell you another thing, Maggie.
Referee management.
Another thing from fly half is this, is given that penalties are almost always around set pieces or breakdowns, forwards are generally around there. And a captain who is a forward is generally just next to a referee or very close. If you're a fly half and something happens, you've got to come running in, which makes it, seem as though you're interfering. When, say, Alan Wynne-Jones used to just stand next to the referee, and McCaw just stand and say, sure. Can I ask you about that? Very, very matter of fact out the corner of your mouth. Whereas Owen Farrell runs in, and he's got a very blunt northern accent, and it looks like an assault.
I do think there should be in a team various different types of captains, So I think you're right. You've got to have. We always talk about a pack leader. Like Brian, have someone in the pack who can definitely communicate with the referee. Most referees only want to speak to the captain, so I look, for me, I've always loved a captain to be a forward. But again, some of my best captains have been 9 and 10. So as long as they're in a decision-making role, who've got the vision to see the whole game and understand the whole picture. Sometimes you probably could say forwards don't always have that option to be able to see the whole game, what's happening in front of you, could focus on, the contact, the set piece, all of that really. So yeah, I totally agree with you. I do think you kind of need a player who's close to the referee who can communicate them when something happens at that very moment in time, rather than having someone out in the back just to run all the way in. But look, Stuart Hogg, he's captain for Scotland, and Scotland are doing pretty well, and he's fullback, and he has to run in the water.
Okay, well, look, Austin Healy wrote in the Telegraph. I don't often agree with Austin, but The Jones selection this weekend will define the rest of his tenure as coach. Now, I do agree with him in this way. We'll see his intention and see his whether his loyalty and to me sometimes misplaced loyalty in players who he has coached for a long time. But the fact is, because of the way the squad was picked originally and the limited number of players in it, he hasn't got that much room for manoeuvre. So he can't suddenly have radical change, and he isn't going to have radical change. We're not going to see, Randall before he's injured, but we're not going to see Marcus Smith. We're not going to see Simmons and so on. So do you think within the limited scope that he has for change, he will make them?
I don't think he will, based on the fact that, yes, they lost to Wales, but when you listen to his post-match interviews, Eddie very much saw it as, look, they started off poorly, they had some decisions against them, but he is quite confident that that performance that England had to come back, to bring it back to 24 all, I think he felt that there was definitely a better second half. So I think he'll just see it as England ended on a improved performance from their first half. And actually, this is a team that's now starting to find its flow. I would love to see changes. I personally still probably, it's difficult. You don't want to go dramatic changes. And like you said, he's got COVID restrictions, which means that his squad's limited. But, he
could swap Watson and Daly, couldn't he? He could swap Watson and Daly into what I think are better positions for them temperamentally. I mean, without swapping any personnel, just a positional change.
Yeah, totally. I also think Lawrence, I would love to see Lawrence back in the centres. I think he's a good centre. Didn't really get much of an opportunity against Scotland. Didn't play against Italy where he could have really thrived. And I think, his combination, you could put him with Farrell, but I do think he would be another one as well. So you're right, more positional changes rather than dramatic, full changes out of the squad. OK, well, look, they're facing France. And this is a good French team. We all know that. It's got good depth, but they haven't played for quite a while. And who knows? I mean, the thing is about when people have COVID, some people have symptoms, some people don't. We don't know because he's rightly being kept under wraps by the French, who's had what to what extent. And they're coming to Twickenham. So, I don't think they'll run riot there. And I think it's going to be a close game if both sides play well. What's your feeling about what we can expect from the French? See, I think, we've seen what the French have done over the past two rounds anyway. Obviously, they missed the third one. Some exciting rugby, especially when their top players are informed. They've also got two key players coming back into the squad. So Ntamak has come back and Fakatawa has come back as well. And they're brilliant. We know what they can do. So I think we're going to see a really fresh French side ready to play, where you will see a wounded England side who, really have a lot to prove. And like Austin Healy said in his article, there's pressure on their shoulders, and there's pressure on Eddie's shoulders to want to win. They have to win. They need the win. So I expect a lot from the French. I expect the French to really come out fighting. I think it will be a close game. I'm going to put it out there. I think it will be a close game.
I just want to wait at this point. It was reported, Jamie George said, look, England are frothing at the mouth to get into this game. And that phrase, along with the phrase Eddie Jones keeps using about brutality, just betrays the wrong mindset to me. We don't want rabid dogs. We want people who are calm and intelligently, belligerent. You need to focus that sort of thing. And given England's disastrous penalty counts in some games, that is the least appropriate sort of metaphor I think you can have, running around with distemper. Why don't we speak to, for a French perspective, Thomas Castaignède, former French far half. The French team, we've seen that they have got depth as well as the initial squad. They've got an understanding of how they want to play now. They're playing to that plan, and when they are given opportunities, they are very dangerous. Do you expect, with the layoff, them to just continue on that without any problem, or do you think they might have a bit more problem at Twickenham?
Well, first of all, I think as a French perspective, we are really surprised by the quality of the team, because things went so quickly with Fabien Galtier, and we come from so deep, and no one expected us, to be at this level so quickly. But I think we got a generation of player which is massively, which has a massive impact, on French rugby. And we don't speak only about the first 15 choice, but as you said, the depth is there. And even when we have injuries, we are able to cope with the best teams. But I really think that the French team is getting stronger. But when I see the other teams, I think the level is going down from, the other Six Nations team. I think Wales, Ireland, they look like old teams, they seem to have the same players since 20 years, and they always play the same game, so they are very predictable. If I have to speak about England, I'm very surprised because if you pick the players individually, I think the quality is there, but I don't understand why they play so bad, since the last 2 years. And I think with the quality of the players that they have, maybe it could be explained by the fact that the players of Saracens are not playing this year. They have a major impact, in the English team. But I cannot understand why they kick so much into the ball, why they were so enthusiastic. They produced such a good rugby, in the last 2 or 3 years. But then now they look completely, lost. And I think there's now French rugby, we play totally differently. I think the quality in the player is there individually, but as a team, we really gel together. And I think we are the team to beat now in the Six Nations.
Two things I wrote in my article for Telegraph today. Dupont and Olivon are two absolutely key players for France now. I think Olivon is assuming like a McCaw rugby, an importance of Richie McCaw was to the All Blacks. And I've said that even though England play on the edge, they need to get pressure specifically on these two players. If they can do that, what effect do you think it might have?
Well, first of all, Olivon, if we have to speak about Olivon, he has been injured for 2 years in the last 4 years. And we thought at one stage that he was not going able to play at the highest level or even play again, rugby. And he came from Bayonne and he signed for Toulon, so massive step for him. But as a player, he's got everything you need, to play at the highest level. And if you compare him to McCormick, I would compare him more to Kieran Reid, someone with speed, and someone who's able to make the yards, create some danger. And then when you have Dupont next to you, which is probably the best scrum half in the world at the moment, this guy is really unbelievable. He can create some danger when the team is struggling. He can. You always think at the start of the game that you're going to catch him, and I saw him play, for Toulouse in the last 2 years. He's really unstoppable, and so that's playing with these players. I think for the French team, for the pack. First of all, that even if you got some trouble, these players can add value to your balls, and for the back line, they only give you the good balls, so that's much easier to play.
So Thomas, obviously France round 3 game was postponed. Do you think it's going to have an impact on their ability to really put in a good performance against England then?
The confidence is there, and especially with some players who are coming back in the team, because we have Vakatawa who's coming back in the center. And this guy will have a massive impact, because even if the French team played really well in the first 2 games, I think Vakatawa has a massive impact when he's on the field. He was injured, at the start. Romain Tamac will come back too. He didn't have such a very good game with the French team against Brive this weekend, but when he has to play at the highest level, he will always deliver. So I think these 2 players, they know exactly all the tactics of the French team. Dupont and then Tamac, they play together all the time, so they are very linked. And so I think for the French team, it's a massive step. Even if we're going to miss, I think, one of the guys that we don't speak so much about, but he does a lot on the pitch. It's Gabin Villiers, a new winger. He's the new Vincent Clerc, on the wing. He's very strong with his upper body. He was very good in the sevens. He's been best player in Hong Kong, a few years ago. And this guy, he brings something to the team, all the time he plays, So I think we have all the ingredients to create, a good game in Twickenham. But we know French players that playing in Twickenham is never easy, and I'm pretty sure that England is not playing at the level they should play. So I think for that game, you always step up, to the next level, and I'm pretty sure that it's going to be very hard for us at Twickenham on Saturday.
Do you think Vakatawa will go straight in at 13? Because obviously Van Sant has been playing really well, hasn't he, at 13?
But Vincent is not selected because he still have some issues with the coronavirus.
Yeah.
But I saw the game of Vakatawa this weekend between Toulon and Racing, and Vakatawa was really amazing. He didn't play in the last 6 weeks, but every time he had the ball, he had an impact. He scored a try. He's a threat, and every time he plays, you have to focus 2 or 3 defenders on him because he's able to make the pass, into contact, and he's got something special. And I'm pretty sure they're gonna use him, straight into the game.
Tom, our final question: what do you think the result will be?
I think it's going to be a draw.
You liar. I think England will be happy with a draw. Tom, good to speak to you. Take care.
If it's a draw, you have to call me back.
Absolutely. Champagne is on me. Well, barring a freak result from Italy, Wales will go into the final weekend of Six Nations in the hunt for a Grand Slam. There's been an air of controversy around all 3 games. I think that's fair to say. What have you made of them so far? I mean, Thomas said that he felt they'd gone down a bit.
I would actually say, who would have thought at the start of the tournament that they'll be in a position where they potentially could go on to win a Grand Slam?
Nobody, including everyone from Wales.
I think it's actually really good. Pivac going into the tournament had a lot of criticism about, his style of rugby hasn't been obviously imposed onto that Welsh side. They weren't really performing. They show up in the round 1. Yes, there's a red card. And then they show up again in round 2. Yes, there's another red card. And then against England, there's 2 potential controversial tries. But actually, you'd look at the way the Welsh played against England in particular, especially, you'd say, second half as well. They were clinical and they took their opportunities. And even with the 2 tries that are controversial, they took the opportunity. So you've almost got to take your hat off to the Welsh. And, Alwyn Jones is still going strong as a captain. And you'd probably say with the Welsh side, there's some really good young players coming through that are standing up. And, Lewis Rees-Zammit is fantastic to watch. It's exciting to watch. And the players like North, who have almost found their form again, who's playing in 13 now, in the centres, is also playing some good rugby. So it's been quite exciting to watch the Welsh team almost grow in this tournament, and I generally think that they'll play against Italy. There's a good chance they'll win that, and then the final game they'll be fighting out potentially for a Grand Slam.
Well, look, Ireland are taking on Scotland. It's at Murrayfield. Scotland obviously had an enforced rest following the slip up against Wales last time at home, and Ireland seem to be improving slowly under Andy Farrell. Johnny Sexton's extended his deal. What do you make of this? Because I find this really hard to call.
I think we always know between these 2 teams, I know it sounds quite obvious, but it can go either way. I always feel similar to the French with the Scots, they've had that, it's not a rest weekend at all, but obviously they've had a weekend where they can actually almost rest certain injuries and actually build up that hunger to take on Ireland, especially as they lost the game beforehand. And also I feel with Ireland, I don't know, again, it's almost similar to the Welsh side. They're slightly growing in strength. They had a good performance against Italy, but, again, Italy probably aren't at their very best. I think, Johnny Sexton, when he's in form, so is the rest of the team. And I feel like Ireland are starting to get depth now in their squad. So that's starting to come through, like with the likes of Billy Burns. I don't know. I feel like the Scottish team, for me, though, are incredibly looking strong. I thoroughly enjoy watching them. They've got some good players. And you almost feel like when you talk about the Lions as well, there's going to be quite a few Scottish players in that Lions team because of the way the Scots are playing.
Well, why don't we talk about the Lions in this aspect? Warren Gatland, I think, has sounded out both Farrell and Townsend to be members of his coaching ticket. That would be a high-powered coaching triumvirate, but there are big personalities there. And they're all used to being in charge. Now, will that work necessarily?
I don't know. Do you know what, Brian? The last lot of Lions tours, there's always been some key personnel in the coaching staff, and whether they are head coaches for their national team or assistant coaches, they've still got strong personalities. And I mean, obviously, Andy Farrell's worked with Warren Gatland. Gregor Townsend, to my knowledge, I don't think has worked with Warren Gatland in that capacity. So I think, we talk about all these top national players coming together who are captains or not captains, and they've got to make it work. The coaching team have exactly the same with regards to their personnel. You put your ego to the side and actually you put your knowledge together and take on what potentially could be a strong South African outfit.
Well, lastly on the Lions, I don't know if you all know this, but the proposed plan to stage in Australia has finally been shelved. I never thought it was a realistic prospect anyway, not least because the Australian Rugby Union offer to underwrite the tour was not bogus, but it was a bit far-fetched given that they claim they're nearly bankrupt anyway. So the four options remain: a UK and Ireland-based tour, home tour, a tour to South Africa with matches behind closed doors or very limited crowds, a postponement until 2022, or a cancellation. Now, they can't move it to 2022. There isn't enough room in the calendar. And the national coaches will be quite right, in my opinion, would actually be wrong to say, yeah, we'll this, a year before a World Cup, we'll give you all our players. I'm sorry, England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, they've all got their own ambitions for the World Cup, and that is more important to them. I love the Lions, obviously I was one, and so on, but the national game depends on national success. And given the parlous state of most of the union's finances at the moment, the Lions is a luxury for them, and I don't say that lightly. So that for out is me. A cancellation, I think, would be out. What do you think about the home tour aspect?
You know what, Brian? It's been interesting listening to lots of people within our rugby community talking about they want to go abroad and do the touring aspect of Lions is what makes it really special. I guess my attitude is I just want the Lions to go ahead. I just want to see some top rugby. And like you've already highlighted, if it gets moved back a year, it potentially puts players. Well,
Maggie, it won't get moved back a year. There isn't room. They won't get the permission. I know,
that's why I think, for me, I just want to see it go ahead. So, like one of the options, obviously, it could be in South Africa, but with no fans. It could be obviously over here, United Kingdom. And for me, I'm pretty happy with any option, to be honest. I just want to see some good rugby. So wait, let me throw it back to you again, Brian. What would be your preferred option? What do you want to see?
My preferred option would be them to tour, to go to South Africa. But if I have a choice of this only, touring South Africa behind closed doors and actually getting a crowd in, I have now changed my opinion. I originally said that they should tour come what may. But having seen and been present at games, international games, where there is no crowd, it really isn't the same. It isn't the same. It isn't the same for the players. It isn't the same experience. Even for the spectators via TV, it isn't the same. So for me, getting a crowd of some sort into these games is very important. And the most likely prospect for that, to me, seems to be on these shores, given the vaccination programme that's been rolled out, given the relaxation of the rules. And I think if we don't have these idiots like Hartley Brewer get things wrong, then we may well be able to have this as a last lockdown and gradually ease other things. And that would be great because, who knows, we could start off with a 20% crowd. It may be built. And by the time it comes around, we could get that. It's not ideal. But then again, you also got to look at it from a South African point of view. They have got 400 odd players outside South Africa. They've got nearly 200 in the UK. And I don't know where do you live, Maggie?
I live in Buckinghamshire.
Oh, you don't. So you don't live. See, I live in the Yarpy Triangle, down in South London, between Earlsfield, Wimbledon, and Southfields. And I could tell you, we've got 4 South African supermarkets. It is full of South Africans, and they, will be desperate to get tickets and money. So you might at least have a balanced crowd as well, a little bit of a balance. So I think of all the things that, I really do want it to go ahead. I don't think a cancellation. And the other thing is it will make money. And that's a good thing because the Lions makes quite a bit of money, which it gives away to the unions. And at the moment, for the good of the Lions brand and getting cash in. And I hate to keep stressing this, but the state of the nations, all unions' finances at the moment is parlous. It's really not good. So just getting that cash in and improving the viewer experience and having fans there, for me, I've changed my mind on that. We're recording this on International Women's Day. I see behind you 100 First Women Portraits. What's that about?
Yeah. So that's just a book of basically pictures of women who have been the first in whatever field they've done. So,
okay. So I presume some of them either were or are women you admire. Can you pick out a few for us?
Actually, there's the one woman that I admire isn't in that book. So I should have talked to the author and said, can you just put her in, please, next time? But so I guess when we talk about International Women's Day, a woman who's really kind of been my idol, I guess, when I was growing up was Denise Lewis, heptathlete, who won gold medal in 2000 in the Olympics in Sydney. Just amazing, someone who I think growing up, rugby, obviously I liked rugby, but I didn't really think too much about it. And the sports that always attracted and appealed to me was athletics. I always wanted to be a sprinter or running the relay in the final of the Olympics. But, for her, she sort of looked like me, had a similar background to me, and I was really inspired by that. And I think when we talk about International Women's Day, it very much is about that, isn't it? Like if you can't see it, you can't be it. Or we can also say if you can't see it, it's hard to be it. And I think when I saw her, I thought, well, I could really potentially make it as a top athlete. And even though I didn't go down the world of athletics or heptathlon, I still sort of saw her and thought, well, I could also be a top athlete. And then obviously I found rugby later on. But she definitely was a person who kick-started my momentum to want to be successful.
Meghan Markle?
We love Meghan Markle. Do you know what? I'm so looking forward to listening to the interview or watching the interview tonight. I have to say I did follow some of the tweets last night from all the Americans, and it's obviously a very juicy interview. So, I'm looking forward to hearing all about that.
Look, it's the first time we've spoken since the new format for the Women's Six Nations was announced. We had the cancellation of the Women's World Cup, which is unfortunate. What do you make of the new format? And are you in favour of the tournaments as a standalone?
So, the new format was brought into place because the Women's Rugby World Cup was going to be fast approaching. So the women's international calendar was quite condensed. So they changed the format to reduce the amount of games so that it wouldn't clash with the Olympics and the Women's Rugby World Cup. But now the Women's Rugby World Cup has been postponed and is going to be pushed back to 2022. I guess you probably would say the format should change. So the format currently is there's two pools, A and B, 3 teams in each side, and then one team. So you play every team in your pool, and then the top team from each pool plays the other team top in that pool. So England have got Italy and Scotland, and then potentially, who knows, they could play in the final France. I'm just saying that's potentially.
No, that's what's going to happen.
Idea. That will likely happen. So, I think that format works quite well when the World Cup was going to happen. But now I think they should probably take it back to the original format of a original Six Nations. But I do think that the idea of pushing the Women's Six Nations to the window of April is actually a really good idea. It's been talked about before, doing it outside of the men's window where potentially you can get more eyes on the game, more exposure. People who don't watch women's rugby might actually take an interest to want to watch women's rugby. As you know, when it's in the same light as the men, the benefit is that you've got the commercial opportunities that run alongside the men. But at the same time, the natural people tend to go down the route of watching the men's game over the women's game, and actually, how can we get the opportunity to get people to watch both? So,
what about the crowd? What about the crowd thing, Maggie? Because playing it just after men's internationals or just across the road from a stoop or whatever has certainly dragged a few people in that might not have watched. But then when you've taken them to places like Exeter, Doncaster, crowds seem to have been good anyway. So. Do you think it's the right time to make that leap?
I think you've got to take a step at some stage. Yeah. And actually, I guess the COVID situation, even though it's not good, has probably forced the women's Six Nations setup to have to try this out. And I actually think we could see a real good range of attendances, depending, obviously, by then if crowds can go back, which I don't think will be the case. But, the last Six Nations, I think it was France versus England, the crowds were huge over in France. And then obviously over here, I think it was England versus Wales. That was a big attendance. And even at domestic level where Saracens played Exeter, I think they had a huge audience viewing on the stream. So it just shows you that people want to watch women's rugby when it's available to them. So if we can do that outside the men's window, I think we could really get some new followers.
Maggie, I'll just cover this before we go into the final part of the show, which is about the questions. Some of the stick you've been getting on in the media, how bad has it been?
Oh, Brian, social media, it's always you can either love it or you hate it. And unfortunately, I worked on the round one of the Six Nations, Italy versus France. I was in the studio with Gareth Thomas and Jill Douglas, and my former teammate, Daniel Waterman, was in the commentary with David Flatman. And unfortunately, I got a lot of sexist abuse after that, and so did Daniel Waterman as well. But if anything, I took a lot of her abuse because people just saw a woman and heard a woman's voice and assumed it was mine. So I think what has been really disappointing, and we've seen it with Sonia McLaughlin, obviously, after the England-Wales game, there's just been a lot more abuse out there. And unfortunately, a lot of it has been sexist. It might not necessarily refer to the gender, but the tone is definitely a sexist tone. And I just think, Brian, you've sort of seen it as well. It's almost like, is it a result of the COVID situation? People are at home, people are frustrated, so they want to lash out onto people who are currently on TV or in the public eye. I don't know, but at the same time, I think it's important that we call out abuse, full stop. And it was sad to see as well that the men were getting it after the Wales game. I know Genj was very open about what he got. So I just think we need to continue to call it out. And I do think social media platforms, organisations need to do more to try and curtail that as well.
Well, I'll tell you what they should do, Maggie. They should do at least this. I do understand the need for some people to have anonymity. Some people, with a guy called Secret Barrister who writes a lot about courts because of his anonymity, and he embarrasses people because he gives the true nature of what's going on in the justice system. So I do understand that. But there's no doubt that anonymity allows people who are cowards to abuse people. I just think this: if Twitter and other social media sites made people prove who they were before they gave them an account, so they could be contacted and potentially, the names and details given over if they broke the law or if they libel people, then at least that would give people a remedy, and people would know if you want to be anonymous and you misbehave or you break the law or you libel people, then you can at least be brought to book.
I fully agree. It would take away the anonymity of it and actually make sure people become almost visible and, it's accountable. I think that would definitely change things up. It just disappoints me that we've seen so much of it, and I just, it's awful. And I'm pretty strong. I crack on and I'll keep speaking speaking my knowledge and whatever it may be. But I just feel for those who, it does have an impact, and I just hope it stops.
OK, let's go on to the questions from the fans. Gareth, should the Wales-France game be postponed until France have caught up with their fixtures so we get a possible Grand Slam decider? Because no disrespect to Italy, he expects Wales to beat them this week, and I expect them to beat them this weekend. I think the more problematic thing is, I think the England-France game will be close at Twickenham. There is a possibility that England will. I don't think it's a probability. I think France are favourites. But the problem with this is it's all over the place anyway. There's already been a postponement. Once you start doing this, who knows where we may be, what happens between then and then. You set it up if there's another COVID outbreak or I'm afraid, Gareth, for me, it's just got to go ahead as it is. Not ideal, but that's the way it is. Why don't you answer this one from no less a person than the Frenchman Michel Roux Jr., who's a Quins season ticket, or good lad, is Michel. How good are Quins? And is it time for England to look to the future, by which you think he means Don Brandt and Marcus Smith in particular?
So for me, I think Quins are incredibly good. I obviously watched yesterday, and Marcus Smith, I was listening to the BT Sport commentators, and obviously the talk in the studio as well. And I've watched Marcus Smith throughout this season anyway, and obviously parts of last season. And the guy is sensational. You almost think to yourself, why has he not had the chance properly at England to really have a go? He's been obviously an apprentice player and so on. But there's so many players in that Harlequin side where you just think they are absolutely being able to thrive. They're coming back into their form. I'm a big fan of Alex Don Brandt as well. He's someone I truly believe, along with Sam Simmons, who should be involved in the England setup as well.
In some way or other.
Yeah, totally. Because I think, there's players like that who, they've got the stature, but also quite good leaders. I know Don Brandt got carded in the game yesterday, but I think there's players like that who just really do stand up and who are key and integral and could really make an impact at the international level. But there's always questions about, does Eddie see certain players at club level as international players? I think that's where...
Well, the thing is, Maggie, as you know, he won't find out whether they can play international rugby if he doesn't play them.
I totally agree with you. Hey, look, Harry Randall, for me, I think he's sensational at Bristol, and obviously now he's injured, but God, I'd love to have seen him at international... sensational at Bristol, and I'd love to have seen him play for England and see what he could have done, but like I said, just don't get a chance to really get a run out.
Couple more. One from Gregory. Do you think there was an obvious first choice scrum half for the Lions? No, not a standout. Several candidates. I wouldn't say. No, I wouldn't put much or any money on any particular person. Maggie?
I am with you there, Brian. I always think about, what's the Six Nations team of each week, and sometimes Youngs has some good bits. Then I think Ali Price does some good stuff. I think it's a real mix at the moment now. So I think there's definitely that line shirt, that number 9 shirt, the starting shirt is definitely up for grabs.
Okay, last one for both of us. I'll answer it first, then I'll give you a bit more time to think about it. These aren't Warrior England highs, Warrior England lows. Well, I tell you what, England lows, obviously the Grand Slam game in 1990, which I've just stopped having therapy about. It's only 30 years. The England loss to Wales, though, in the quarter-final of the 87 World Cup was such a dire, awful game and performance that I tell you, in terms of actual lows in performance, that was the one. So those two with England. And, of course, losing to Australia in the World Cup final. But in terms of actual lows of performance, quarter-final, 87. Maggie?
So for me, I'll just pull out one really. The main one for me was losing to New Zealand. Just losing to New Zealand full stop is always a low. Losing to New Zealand in 2010 in the Women's Rugby World Cup final in England. I think that was
the one at Quins, wasn't it?
That was at Quins, the Stoop, and we only lost by 3 points.
I know, I was there. I was watching.
I still think we were robbed. I mean, obviously, no, we weren't robbed. I mean, they're such a good side. Just to lose them, and for me, it was the second time I'd lost them in the final. I just thought
in that game, I thought they just kicked better from hand. I thought their range of kicking was better.
They actually had in that game, I think from what I remember, 2 yellow cards. So at one time, they were playing with 13 players and we had 15 and we still didn't beat them. So I thought they were brilliant and they did deserve to win on that day.
OK, well, that's all we have time for this week on Brian Moore's Full Contact with the Telegraph. When we come back, we'll be dissecting what happened at Twickenham. Did England arrest France's seemingly inexorable domination of European rugby? Did Wales stay on track? Of course they did. And what happened between Scotland and Ireland? And what you don't know is the Scots and the Irish do not like each other. They really don't. This is a historical matter. It's about land clearances and all sorts of things, but they really don't like each other. A huge thank you to my co-host, Maggie Alphonsi, and to Thomas Castaignède for joining me. If you've enjoyed this episode, why not subscribe and check out some of our previous ones? And to stay up to date on all things sport, head to the Telegraph, looking at telegraph.co.uk/contact, where you can get 30 days access to all the Telegraph's premium sports coverage, and it's completely free. I'll be back next Monday, as I say, but now, goodbye.